Welcome to The Logic of Generosity, the podcast for bold nonprofit leaders who refuse to settle for ordinary. Here, we cut through the noise with unfiltered insights from fundraising experts designed to spark bigger gifts, deeper donor connections, and a brighter future for your mission. Let's dive in.
Well, this episode is brought to you by Pleiades Nonprofit Advisors, and we now offer database services from a certified Blackbaud Razor's Edge, NXT, and Network Plus database administrator. Less friction means more mission. When your data's a mess, your message misses. When it flows clearly, your mission gains momentum. At Pleiades, we design clarity. We bring order to chaos so that your team can focus on what matters. Identifying interested donors, building meaningful donor relationships, and moving faster with confidence. Relevance begins with clean data, the right message, right person, right time, but that only happens when your data is accurate, useful, and accessible. Our three essentials are data cleanup, clear vision, that's going to be the result. No more duplicates, no more undeliverables, no more wasted time. We'll standardize names, emails, and addresses so that your outreach works the first time, every time. We also offer CRM migration and setup, which allows for a smooth, thoughtful transition. Switching systems should not feel like skydiving without a parachute. We precisely carry your donor history, we validate every field, and we're going to map everything carefully so nothing is lost and nothing breaks along the way. The third thing we offer is staff training, empowered people, smarter decisions. It's not enough to have a better tool. Your people need to know how to use it. We train your team, we customize your protocols, and we build their confidence to own the system from day one. We also offer other items like custom reporting, ongoing CRM support, and workflow design. But finally, you've got a system that works. No more chasing reports, no more apologies for messy data, just a clean, functional, mission-aligned CRM environment designed to help your people do their best work. Because when data works, your mission moves. Javier and Cassie Reyes, welcome back. We only just skimmed the surface when we chatted last time, and I just knew that we needed to get this on the books sooner than later. And as we're just like looking through our schedule together for August and September, the answer was nope, 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 nope. And so it's like, okay, I'm just so glad that we were able to land a time together. I think one of the things that even I was thinking about this when we ended our last podcast is I don't even know why I was sharing the screen because that's not really what the podcast is about. It's much more about a just an interaction rather than a presentation. And so whoops, audience, sorry. It was just one of those things where I was just not in the moment. But I wanted to set up our time together to not only continue on through what it is that, we have a lot of discussion to have, but I really think it would be helpful if we were able to get started with the idea of just kind of put yourself in this situation. Javier, Cassie, I am a, gift planner, and let's say I get a donor who's on the phone, and I started having the conversation about, hey, I'm just curious, how did you end up funding this last gift? And then they say, well, I wanted to fund it with stock or whatever like that. And then I start getting into the question, do you have real estate? What does that look like for you? And sure enough, the donor starts describing the fact that they've got maybe a bunch of rental properties, or maybe it's a vacation home, or maybe it's a commercial property. Maybe they're trying to sell their business and they're not sure exactly how to approach it. So I think it would be good for you to walk me through some of the more preliminary things that I need to do to be able to paint the appropriate expectations for the donor so that I am not kind of, backtracking a little bit later on because maybe I said or promised the wrong thing. So I think it would be good for me to know how to kind of lay the foundation, the groundwork for these particular donors to make sure that we're all kind of moving in the right direction together. Because as we've talked about, it gets messy. So welcome back, and maybe you can share a little bit about how we get started in that.
Okay. So assuming that the donor has contacted you and says, Andy, I'm going to leave you 123 Main Street. Obviously, you need the address and a brief description of the property type. First thing that I would do would be get a preliminary title report on the property. And the title report is going to list just about everything that's on record on the property, whether there's any kind of encumbrances, liens, easement, licensing, any problem with the property that's going to pop up in the sale or in the transfer of the title of the property will be, I can't say 100% of the time, but most of the time is going to be on the title report.
Let me ask you real quickly, just with regards to the lien issue or the encumbrances. Are there some common things that you tend to see with liens?
We had a property, we've had several, but the one that kind of jumps out at me that it would apply here is a number of years ago, we sold a property in Glendale. And it had an old lien because grandma, I think, loaned somebody money. Like, I don't know, a long time ago. And she did not, once she got paid, if she got paid, she didn't get a deed of reconveyance back that's saying that the loan was paid off. And so in order to sell, and this was a trust property that we were selling, we had to get a bond on the property for just grandma was long gone. I mean, she wasn't going to pop up, but the title company wouldn't give us free and clear title until we addressed this. I mean, and I don't know, Cassie can probably remember it better, but it was a long time ago, this lien. So that's just an example of something of an oversight. If somebody, say they've had the property 50, 60 years, and that person acquired that property from the help from a grandparent, who's no longer around.
I mean,
So there could be a lien still recorded on the property.
yeah, so let's say for example that in particular that lien showed
Mhm.
up and it was something that was showing up on the title report.
Mhm.
Is that something that, I mean, who takes care of that? How does that get,
The
how does,
title company will take care of it, and I would take care of it. Once that comes up, you would address that with the donor and say, hey, you know what, there's this lien from 1962 on the property or whatever, whatever. And they probably didn't even know about it, to be honest with you, because they probably inherited the property. And in that situation, they'll just issue a bond. And then the bond, I mean, it was a nominal fee. I can't remember how much it was, but it wasn't, I mean, it's money, but it still has to be done in order for that title to be transferred to anybody.
I
I
see.
think I can elaborate a little bit on what the preliminary title will tell you. Aside from these liens that were never removed from the property, the one of the main purposes of the title report is to show who's the legal owner currently. So you may have someone tell you, I have this property, I inherited it from my grandparents, and I want to donate it now or later, but their name isn't actually on as the legal owner. So, number one, you have to figure out, is this donor actually the legal owner? Can they transfer? If it's held in a trust, you want a copy of their trust, the trust certification that shows who has the legal authority to buy and sell properties within the trust. Um, Also, things like solar leases, they get recorded onto the title of a property. So if a property has solar or any other leased item that's attached, we would need to know exactly what the deal is with those and either deal with them up front or know that during the transfer, we're going to have to transfer those as well to the foundation or whoever's going to own it next. And then Things like easements for utilities or easements that a neighboring property has on the subject property that we might need to know about. Like someone has to drive over your driveway to get to their property. Things like that that you may not know otherwise, or the donor may not even know exists. So number one, first thing we always do, we'll contact our title rep, pull a prelim on the property, review it, make sure there's nothing scary. And if there's something that needs to be addressed before we can sell it, we can work with the title company and the donor and the foundation to get it cleared up before. Because the last thing we want is to be halfway through an escrow selling it with a buyer and something rears its ugly head and it takes us a month to clear it up. So we like to get as much stuff handled with the title up front. And that even includes if that grandson who said he inherited it, for some reason the deed putting it into his name wasn't done properly or what have you, we can get that cleared up also. The second thing that we usually want up front is a natural hazards disclosure on the property that tells us, is it in a high fire zone? Is it in a flood zone? Are there underground storage tanks right down the street from an old gas station that doesn't exist anymore? Is there anything on the property? If it's a rural property, maybe it has some sort of a well, or it had a tank of some sort on the property, or it has a gas pipeline running through the property for the utilities. So just things to know like that that could come up and affect insurance or anything else, the saleability to a new buyer. That's important. And so the preliminary title report is free. The NHD costs about $100, and they don't even pay for that until they close on the property. So there's no upfront costs with things like that. And then we ask about any insurance claims of the current owner. Has there been any insurance claims on the property in the last few years? How much are they currently paying for their policy? Have they had any issues with their insurance? Because we want to know for the future buyer if they will also have issues, and what their approximate costs are going to be. And then we like to do kind of a Google Street View walk around the property, the neighborhood, look at it in the satellite view, see if there's anything glaring there that we think might be an issue. And then of course, maybe a drive-by. If we think that all of these things make it donatable, doing at least a drive-by to see it in person helps us. And at that point, with all of those things combined, if it gets to that point, then we can give the foundation clarity with regards to should they take it, is it sellable, what the approximate value is based on our research on the market, or no, it has all these issues, or it's a landlocked piece of property up in the mountains and no one wants it and it's worth $5,000, that type of a thing. But those three things up front, the prelim, the natural hazards disclosure, and talking about insurance are the three main components of the due diligence that we typically undertake ourselves and share the information with the foundation.
There's so much that you just said that was phenomenal. And I think it's going to be absolutely critical. And so I want to unpack a few things just by asking some follow-up questions with you, just with regards to what it is that you shared with me. And one of the things that I just want to say, first of all, kudos for being the ones who are going to be providing that level of due diligence by assessing the title report, by making sure that, that the appropriate ownership, as well as, dealing with liens or encumbrances or anything that's going to be tying up the property and that's going to be revealed sometime down the road. The idea, and it sounds like this is really the idea, it's like you're trying to flag down every single potential issue before an organization will ever even take the property.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that we've done in the past is, and this applies in both in Arizona and in California. There, in Arizona, they have the SPUDs, which is the seller's property disclosure, and then in California, you have the TDS. And we can provide that to the gift officer to give to the donor and have them fill it out.
Mm.
Because then they're going to kind of tell you, well, they're supposed to tell you what, all the issues with the property. Like you filled one out when you sold your home. You had to fill out all these, going to ask you all these questions, this, that, what have you. How old is the roof? When did you do the electricity? Any issues?
Yeah.
Um, that's a good initial start to kind of get to assess, what the condition of the property is. And just because the property is challenged doesn't mean it's not sellable. So, I mean, some of the fastest selling properties are the most challenged properties because there's a specific client that wants that property. But it's just good to know in that mitigation of risk
Mm-hmm.
and what liability, because I think that's the biggest concern with your audience is that they're worried about what's our liability. The more you know going in, the more you can mitigate that risk. You can just say, you know what, this is really going to be marketed once it's donated, once it's accepted, it's going to be sold more to a developer or to someone who's going to repurpose the property more so than that first time home buyer that wants to move into if the property, like I said, has a number of challenges. Um, Typically, you're going to find that the consumers that go and buy those properties, I'm just thinking, 2 or 3 properties that we dealt with last year, they were terrible. I mean, like on a 1 to 10 scale, they were solid ones. And there were so many people looking at those properties because that's that ideal client. So for an organization to say, I only want pristine properties, you're really kind of leaving a lot of money on the table because there's really an audience for everything. It's just you have to understand what you're getting yourself into.
I really love the idea, and this is not even something I've even thought about before, but you just said it, and it's like we hand our donors the spuds or the seller disclosures
Yeah.
that we want them to fill out before we even take the property.
Mhm.
That's to me, it's like brilliant.
But we have to do it with a seller anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
It's brilliant, but it's also a preliminary component of saying, let's talk a little bit about what you know about the property. And in many cases, you may not know, but at the same time, there's probably a lot that you do know, especially if you've owned this for any length of time and you know the quirkiness of each property. And there's always something that's unique about each property, whether it be good or bad. And we want you to share that with us before we even go down this road.
mhm.
Now, I don't know if you've ever had any pushback from donors that are saying, "Well, we're not going to share that," or that sort of thing, or if that's been an issue because I know the seller's disclosures, it's not like one paper, one page, it's several pages of disclosure, as I would learn.
Well, you see, the biggest misconception people have is that everyone says, I want to sell something as is. And you can sell anything you want as is, as long as you disclose. Now, where people get in themselves into legal jeopardy is when they don't disclose and they know about something.
Yeah.
So disclosure is a good thing. You can over disclose. You'll never get in trouble for over disclosing. You can, as long as you say it's got this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem, whatever, you're in good shape. It's the folks that are just saying, oh, I'm going to sell it as is. They don't disclose and they knew about something. That's where people get a little, hot under the collar. However, there's ways to get around a donor saying, not necessarily a donor, a gift officer saying, hey, well, I don't know anything about the property. Sure. But then we make sure that there's a lot of due diligence once they accept that gift on the buyer's behalf. We won't for instance, we won't have a waiver of inspection. They won't, unless it's a total, unless it's like about to fall down and they're going to bulldoze it. Well, that's fine. But typically, you would want that buyer to really be very very diligent, employ the best due diligence they could, and to what's reasonable also. That helps in that risk mitigation. And I keep on going back to the concern of everyone's worried about where's my liability, where's my liability. Liability is in the non-disclosure, because if you go in you see there's a bunch of termites jumping out of a house, and you say there's termites, everyone knows there's termites. I mean, sure, you're going to get a pest report done. However, if you had a continuous leak in that house and you never disclose, and that donor doesn't disclose it to you on that SPUDS or on that TDS, someone's gonna find out about it. So these are all issues that it's just better that everyone knows about them up front.
Yeah. No, that's so good. There's a number of things that you had mentioned just in the earlier part of this conversation that goes along with the title report. And one of the things that I want to talk about is insurance.
Mhm.
And Cassie, you had mentioned that in the title report, we want to make sure that whatever hazard issues or increased potential problems, especially here in California, where, gosh, our state has been on fire for the last, 10 years, and insurability now has become just a premium. It's a very, very expensive thing to do to just simply insure a property. And so I would imagine that, that you're looking at, say, those mountain properties that can't get insurance because there's a cajillion trees right next to them, that now that becomes a problem for the donors because maybe they themselves can't get insurance on the property, or the insurance is now so cost prohibitive that it's just like we just don't it just doesn't make sense for us to hold on to it. So they end up getting rid of it with the hopes that a buyer, well, that's your problem, take care of that, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it can stick the organization with maybe something that they didn't anticipate, because sure enough, insurance is way too expensive to be able to sell the way that they're going to sell, and they're caught in this really sticky sort of thing. So can you walk us through a little bit about the insurance issues that you are seeing, but also help us better understand what we do about it and how you combat those insurability issues?
Sure. So, on the last few sales we've had this year, they've all encountered insurance issues where the buyers have gotten quotes for new homeowners insurance that have been a lot higher than maybe the current owner had. Or they cannot get traditional insurance whatsoever, and they have to end up on Fair Plan, which is another issue in itself. So for us, if someone is going to take in a donation in one of these fire hazard areas or a flood zone, or any of these other hazard areas where we know that the insurance is going to be higher, we just want to know up front how much, number one, how much that's going to be for the charity themselves. So if they do take it on, they need to know that once that property is in the name of the foundation, they have to get their own insurance. They can't leave it in the name of the donor,
Right.
because God forbid something happens and they need to use the insurance, it's going to be denied because the donor still has it in their name and they no longer own it.
That's probably
Um,
helpful information for the charity to know that, oh, by the way, you need to have insurance
yeah,
for this property while you have possession of it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, an example, we had a property 2 years ago, and these two sisters, I think they're sisters, inherited the property, and they did not take the insurance and put it in their name. They had it still in whoever, the mother, the
The
father.
mom's name who had passed.
Yeah. And then they canceled it because they were so excited not to have to pay for it anymore.
Oh, boy.
And they had to rush out because the escrow got extended. They had to rush out and get a new policy because if something had happened under that old policy, they wouldn't have been covered. So because they thought, oh, we'll just leave it in the deceased person's name because it was cheap and it
Right.
was there and they didn't have to do anything. And so basically they were uninsured for a while. I mean, they were insured but uninsured. They would nothing would have been paid on it because they would have said that the person who was insured is no longer around.
Crazy.
So
Yeah.
that's something
So
to look at.
yeah. So insurance along with utilities, that kind of goes hand in hand when they take in a donation. They're going
Oh,
to have to switch all the utilities into their name out of the donors. And HOA dues, if it say it's a condo or it's a house in an HOA, they need to make sure that that gets transferred to them as well. And then the insurance. And most of the time, if we know that the property is going to have insurability issues, we will instruct any potential buyer once it's on the market to get an insurance quote before they write an offer so that they know upfront how much it's going to cost and that they're okay with that as far as their monthly costs, which will cut down on fallout where someone ends up canceling halfway through escrow because they find out that the insurance is going to be $30,000 a year and they really can only afford 5,000. So we try to do that up front as much as possible now just to cut down on the heartache.
that is so, so smart. You guys did that with my home, and I'm grateful because I remember as we had a number of offers that were on the property, you know, as you're just kind of going back and just tightening, having everybody tightening their offer up a little bit, that you ended up saying, look, you know what, we want to make sure that you're going to be happy with the insurance. So you got to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you have proof that you got a quote of insurance uh,
Mm-hmm.
when you make the offer. So I just thought that was so smart.
Yeah. Well, and if someone is going to take in a donation of a mountain house, like you said, say it's some small town, not as popular, so it's not $1 million cabin. It's a $300,000 cabin. And we know that the insurance up there costs $50,000. And we're in the middle of a drought and it's fire season. That foundation may want to think twice before actually accepting
Yeah.
that because when it comes down to it, say you have to pay 6 months of that insurance upfront. So you're paying $25,000 right out of the gate to accept that gift. You're probably going to want to do some brush clearance, which is another cost. You want to make sure that cabin's going to be still standing for the next 6 months while you're trying to sell it. And
Yeah.
maybe that area is not that popular and properties take 2 years to sell. Is a $300,000 gross price worth maybe $50,000 in costs and holding costs and the stress of thinking, well, what if a fire goes through there while we own it? Those are things to take into account. And maybe you have other ways of making $200,000 instead of taking on this property and babysitting it for 2 years. And maybe that's not the right move to do for your organization.
Yeah.
But if it was a $2 million house in the same location, maybe you're willing to take more of a risk.
Right.
So those are things to think about with the insurance. It's a balance.
For sure. And you point to the cash flow of an organization that, look, you know what, you're going to have to invest this amount of money, whether it be the 25,000 or perhaps more, based on whatever the property needs,
Mm-hmm.
in order to make it to where it's sellable a little bit later on. But yeah, to your point, it's like, okay, here's this $300,000 cabin. By the time we get all of our fees done, and by the time we get it sold, and by the time we've done all of the due diligence of making sure that the property is sellable, that the brush is cleared, like you said, and you know that the power lines now have visibility, and that the snowfall has been shoveled appropriately,
Yeah,
whatever the might the issue might be. That that they're walking away more than a $10,000 proper or gift.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's got to make sense, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's really good. Yeah, as far as insurability, I like the strategies that you guys have put in front of us to make sure that you're getting quotes from your buyers before we even move this along and select a buyer. That you are eliminating a lot of potential issues that can and often do happen during escrow that gives a buyer a way out because they didn't know up front and they can use that as an excuse to get themselves out of escrow.
Yeah.
I really like that tightening process that just tells you, we got serious buyers, they're very committed to this, they want to see it through, and they're going to do everything they possibly can in order to make sure they do that.
Hmm.
That said, is where do you see the insurance issues going? You mentioned Fair Plan, and there's some problems with that. That's a state-run insurance, bill that has gone through and is made available for California properties. But share with us, if you kind of will, put your magic hat on and or your get out your crystal ball and start reading some tea leaves as to what this all means and where it's all going.
So it sounds like we're picking on California. We're not, because actually California is not even one of the worst states for the premium increases. So Utah is number one. I have the list. I can pull it up. There's a number of other states, but California and Arizona. I mean, they're going through premium increases, but not as bad as other states. So if they're looking at getting a gift in another state and they're talking to a professional who's assessing it for them in that respective state, they're definitely you should address the insurance because California and Arizona are probably in the bottom part of the top 10, but they're nowhere near the top. The insurance cost will go up for the foreseeable future. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but everything we're hearing, it's going up and in high cost areas, it's even going up more. We talked to a guy yesterday. He was talking about insurance quotes, and I mean, I was like in shock about how much that people were paying. But and then this is on he was representing the buyer on a property. But to answer your question, I think it's going to be challenging in some areas. Now, if you get into a metropolitan area, into let's just call it, anywhere in the central LA County or Orange County, where there's no hills and there's no mountains and there's no flood risk, you know what? Your insurance is going to be pretty stable, I would guess, just because the risk of natural disasters is pretty low. The same thing with, if you're talking about the Phoenix area, if you're in, central Phoenix or, parts of, Scottsdale and the municipal areas there, you're going to be fine. I mean, I think you're going to have the same insurance problems in Payson as you are going to have in Big Bear. I mean, because they're both like that's the same type of environment, a lot of trees, cabins, etc. But everyone's going to feel the pinch because I mean, the state just approved State Farm's rate increase, and they want another rate increase. So people will see insurance premiums go up over the next couple of years. So that's just a fact of life, and that people have to just accept that into, when they're buying a house, and they will, and they'll move on, and they'll, sure they don't want to pay it, but they have to because especially if they have a loan. The I think that if the property is, let's just say it's $1 million property that someone gets donated to them, which wouldn't be that hard to get, but let's just say they got $1 million property and they have a relatively low cost to maintain it and acquire it. Then it becomes a business decision for them to discount that property at the time of sale, knowing that they're going to have to incentivize that buyer to take it. So I think you'll see an adjustment on the prices if someone's looking at, a property that's say going to cost them $3,000-4,000 a year to insure. The challenge is when you get over properties that are donated over 3 million, because the fair plan cuts off at 3 million. That's where if you took in a $5 million property, that's when you really want to be very, very clear on how much that insurance is going to be because they're going to have to get a second policy to bridge that gap. That buyer will have to get a second policy to bridge that gap between 3 and 5, 3 and 6, or whatever it is.
I see. So Fair Plan is going to only take you up to that $3 million threshold, and anything that goes above and beyond, then they got to get an additional policy.
Yeah. And Fair Plan, it's not a guarantee that you'll get the $3 million worth of coverage to begin with. So there are insurance agencies that do high-end insurance
Okay.
and they give you that extra coverage, but it's extremely expensive and they want to know everything about the property, the age of every single system, the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, when anything was updated. And if it hadn't been updated in, say, the last 20 years, either the seller has to update it before they will insure it, or the buyer has to agree to do the upgrade right after they close on it, and the insurance company will come out and certify that it's been done.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, they will not get the insurance. They won't insure a 30-year-old roof or a 50-year-old
Right.
HVAC.
When
They
it
want
needs to
new, new,
reflect.
new.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So not only do you have the issues of qualifying for insurance, but you also have the issue of making sure that whatever system your house has and stuff falls apart just because that's just the nature of owning a house that ages
Mhm.
is you have a longevity for these systems. You mentioned the roof, and it's like, look, if you don't replace your roof or update your roof, then you won't qualify for this insurance.
Yeah. Well, we know people personally that have been dropped by their insurance, just regular homeowners, because their insurance company flew a drone over their house,
You're
saw that the roof was old, or saw that it had patching
yeah.
because they had fixed it over the years, and they dropped them.
Wow.
Said, we we aren't even going to give you 6 months to replace your roof. They were just dropped.
No indicator at all.
No.
And so they didn't go inside the house. They didn't
Nope.
see any leaks. They didn't verify that, oh my goodness,
Mm-mm.
that drywall looks like it's had a leak or something like that.
No.
They just say, nope, you're gone.
Yeah.
Whoa, whoa, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Uh, oh my gosh. So,
Yeah.
okay, so now, so let's say it is an individual, a buyer who's saying, you know what, I want to, get on Fair Plan. Does Fair Plan then, they're saying, look, we're going to buy this house. Do they check into Fair Plan's requirements before they purchase the house, or do they kind of learn the hard way afterwards?
Well, a lot of people learn the hard way while they're trying to even get Fair Plan because it's a state-run system, so they're not the fastest. So we've heard horror stories of people that go through the process of trying to apply for a Fair Plan while they're in the middle of an escrow to purchase, and it takes them 3 weeks to
Oh,
hear back, or not at all because there's so many other people in line applying for Fair Plan. So
wow.
it's almost like going to the DMV.
So it's possible, though, for them to close escrow before they have any sort of indicator that they're going to be in.
Well, they can't, not if they have a loan, because
Yeah, if
no one's
if
going
the
to give you a
buyer's getting a
loan without any.
loan, the lender will require a homeowner's insurance. Probably.
So then at what point in time does escrow just pretty much stop and does the deal fall through? Is that pretty much what
It
happens?
it depends on the seller. If they think this is my only buyer, this is my only chance to sell it, they're paying me what I want, et cetera, et cetera. We've already negotiated everything else. We're all happy. Maybe I'll just give them 2 more weeks.
Okay.
Or the whole thing blows up and they try to sell it to someone who's paying cash and maybe doesn't need the insurance or doesn't want it or has their own plan. But it can cause major issues. And
Well,
going
yeah.
back, that's why we try to get everyone to do it up front so we
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I'm just thinking about that situation with the roof. Let's just use the roof for example here. And here is somebody who's delaying. Why? Because Fair Plan isn't responding in the timely fashion that perhaps we would like them to respond. So they then say, you know what, we need an additional 2 weeks. Everything looks pretty good. And then Fair Plan comes 4 weeks later or whenever it is that it comes back and says, oh, by the way, you need a new roof. And then puts that requirement on the seller before the buyer will come and buy it, or the buyer puts that plan, said, well, we didn't know, ergo,
Yeah.
you showed us some grace, but now we're talking about a roof system that's
Yeah.
an additional $40,000.
Yeah.
So stuff like that
It can
happens
be a deal killer. Yeah.
for sure. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
We just had one where we were the listing agents, and it was the last day of the buyer's due diligence period where they had already agreed to the repairs and credits and all the other things. Everyone was happy, but they were on the last day to get their insurance, and they couldn't get a policy to cover over and above Fair Plan. And they obviously really wanted to have full coverage. And it usually, as a listing agent, we don't get involved in trying to find the buyer insurance. But in this case, it was all hands on deck. We were calling everyone we knew that had any connection to any sort of high end insurance company, trying to get this buyer insurance. And the deal ended up going through. But I think at the end of the day, they probably said, you know what, we don't want to screw up the transaction. We'll take the Fair Plan for partial coverage and we'll shop around for the rest after. But that was a very specific situation, where the buyer had the capability to kind of do that on their own. But a regular person who's buying a cheaper house that has to go that route, and maybe Fair Plan will only insure them halfway, most people just can't accept that, or the lender won't accept that.
Wow. So it does make me kind of question, and by the buyers that you are bringing in for when you're listing a property, what percentage off the top of your head would you say are coming in and they're taking a loan out for their property to buy it?
It depends on the property, but you
Yeah.
see, that whole situation tees up to what I said earlier. If the property's challenged and it's noticeably challenged, that buyer's coming in with cash or a cash equivalent. Well, when I mean a cash equivalent, that's a hard money loan, which is essentially cash. And they're gonna basically, if they're gonna repurpose the house and redo the whole thing, they're not gonna be as concerned about the roof because they're gonna put a new roof on it, or they're gonna do all new electrical. So there is, like I said, an avenue for the gift officer. If he says, oh, it's all banged up, fine. This is going to mainly go to a developer, someone who's going to repurpose it. It's not going to go to a retail buyer because the retail buyer is not going to have the wherewithal to, one, get around the insurability issues, get around the conditional issues, et cetera. So that's why I said each of these properties are very unique in their challenges because there is a home for each and every one of them. You just have to kind of be cognizant and have some clarity going in, saying this is going to sell to someone who's going to repurpose it and sell it down flip it.
Yeah,
And
that's really good. I appreciate that because and I think a lot of a lot of foundations and those gift officers who are listening to this, they appreciate that you're going to have buyers that are saying, look, you know what, we don't care because we're just looking to rehab this property anyway,
Yeah.
and we're going to raise it to the ground, or we're just going to keep some structural items, but otherwise we are completely
Yeah.
disassembling
I mean,
this.
I'll give you an example. It was 2 years ago. Cassie was involved in a sale of a fourplex, I think it was. And it was terrible. No floors. The balcony was falling down. I mean, just every major problem in the world. And how many offers were on that property, Cassie?
I think 52.
Yeah. So, and they sold, I mean,
Yeah.
because, but those were all people in that business. That's their line of work. They want to buy, believe it or not, there's people who want to buy the worst properties in the world out there because that's how that's their business model. Their business
Right.
model is they buy
Yeah.
them, they
That was
fix them up,
cash.
and they
That was
sell them.
obviously cash. They were going to renovate the whole thing. and then re-rent the units and either sell it to another investor after that or hold on to it as an investment property.
So I know that there's going to be some individuals that are listening to this that are going to say, yeah, but I don't know if we want to receive that property because we don't know how many buyers like that are out there. Are there a lot?
There are a lot of them.
So you would say, you know what? No, don't worry about it. Take the property.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it
We
or not,
understand there's a bulldozer that's going to be nearby.
I've
I,
30
the,
years I've been doing this. I have never seen a shortage of guys and gals that want to go out and make money. I mean, even in the back in 11 and 12 when we were coming out of the Great Recession, I saw a resurgence of those people. I saw a lot of them in '04 and '05 too. I mean, there hasn't, I mean, I remember after 9/11, how many people, when the market froze, it was in 2001, the market actually literally froze for a while because everyone, there was a country was in shock. And I remember people buying properties up right and left that they were retailed out the following year just because there's really, because that's what people do. That's their livelihood. And so if there's an opportunity for them to buy a property, we get calls every single day, calls, texts, emails. Do you have any banged up beater properties? I mean, every single day we get them. And, it doesn't, those folks are out there because that if they're the folks that are making these they're adding to the housing supply. They're taking a property that who else is going to fix it if you think about it? Because there's a lot of houses that are in disrepair that, somebody needs to go in and redo it. And so I in short, for your audience, I wouldn't worry about finding that person. There are plenty of them out there.
Okay. Okay. That's really encouraging to hear because otherwise it's like, oh my gosh, look at this huge, huge set of responsibilities that we're taking on, and we're hoping that we can get rid of the property and don't want to be stuck.
well,
Um,
sometimes I would say sometimes a property that is in a state of disrepair where a developer has to come and completely build a new house or someone's going to remodel or what have you. Sometimes those are the easiest transactions because they're not going to ask for repairs. They're not going to ask for credits. It's a quicker close. It's all cash. They're not going to do all of these things that a traditional buyer would do. And they don't care about a lot of stuff because they're going to redo everything. So to take a property that has mold and the roof is leaking and it has foundation issues, if you price it correctly,
yeah.
that will sell faster and for more money than a house that maybe was remodeled back in 1990 and is technically livable, but your typical buyer, a new family, would never want because all they see is dollar signs and they don't have the money to do a remodel and they don't want to live in a 1990s house. So it's people are afraid of the properties that are in bad shape, but those are often the best ones because they just sell so fast.
Yeah. And it does bring us, though, and I know we talked a little bit about it last time, but I still think it's going to be worthwhile because I would imagine this might be going through the heads of a lot of folks who are listening to this. And that is the issue of appraisal and a donor saying, hey, I've got an appraiser. And by the way, he's going to appraise the property at X amount. And of course, the donor is trying to get max amount for their property. And so they'll bring in an appraiser. Maybe it's a good appraiser. Maybe it's, somebody who doesn't really get into the details of it and appraises the property at a mistaken level. The charity then receives that property at that mistaken level, discovers that it can only sell for a fraction of
Mm-hmm.
what the property's been appraised at. And then, that kind of puts them in a bad spot. So I guess my question is, how would you recommend a charity to engage an appraiser that would be a little bit more realistic in terms of the property's value?
I would not do a separate appraisal. I would have the donor provide their appraisal, which would be a requirement anyway,
Mhm.
and then engage a real estate agent to give their opinion of value after actually going and touring the property. Sometimes these appraisers that the donors get don't even go inside the property, or they're given misleading information or something and they're just off, or they try to fluff them up a little bit because it's for tax reasons for the donor or whatever it is. But the real estate agent will know the market conditions in the area. They know how fast things are selling. Um, Different things like one of the comps that they used, there was a story behind why the price is what the price was, either in a good way or a bad way. There's just things that an appraiser may not know, that a realtor would know, and just getting an accurate price on how do we price this to actually sell and to sell fast. Like the foundation may say, look, we don't want to have this house on our books for 6 months. And we know that the typical time to sell right now is 100 days. We don't want to hold on to it for 100 days, right? We want to sell it in 30 days, get it done, and get this money because we need to allocate that money to a certain thing in
Right.
December or whatever it is. Then the real estate agent can say, look, typically the houses are being priced at 800,000 and they're selling for 750 and they're taking 100 days. Okay, what if you price yours at 699? It probably will sell in the first 2 weeks for that 750 number. And
Yeah.
it's not going to take 100 days to fall down to that number. You want to push it up. So there's strategy. And going by the donor's appraisal isn't always the best bet because you may be holding on to something for a long time, or maybe it's the appraisal they got is low. You never know. You have to double check everything and see exactly what's going on in that specific market.
Javier, did you want to add to that?
Well, it's like I mentioned on the last time we spoke, that they need, whoever it is that's overseeing this donation, I know that they're not experts in reading appraisals, but they're pretty simple to read and go over with whoever is helping them manage this this donation. But when you have a property that's, let's just say, in a homogeneous neighborhood where there's either, there's 5 or 6 models
Mm-hmm.
and pulling comps from another neighborhood that are 2-story and you're a single story, that should raise a flag. They should say, whoa, this is kind of, a little out. Now, there could be reasons like, maybe the donation's a single level home and there's no single level homes that sold in the last 3 to 6 months. Could be. But you want to look at stuff like that. We've seen appraisals though lately that are, I mean, we've had some that were just very questionable, but at the end of the day, I mean, we have to work with what we get. And that's the same thing. It goes back to that, just the clarity up front, to understand. Who was it? We saw one years ago where the only comp on that property was this guy, the guy donating it. He was his only comp when he bought the property.
Oh boy.
So how do you assess value to, well, he was the last one that bought it. And so those are the kind of things that everyone needs to, and once again, I don't expect the gift officer to have the expertise, but they need to have these conversations that when whoever's working with them and saying, hey, look, how does this appraisal look, and have that agent review it and say, oh, well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or this is all in line, Andy, this is great. It's really worth this.
I love that.
The challenges, and I'm talking about modern, is when you get into neighborhoods that are very distinct. And so there's a lot of cities, a lot of neighborhoods in California and in Arizona too, where you have a blend of older homes and then you have a blend of some newer homes. And you can go one boulevard, and one side of the boulevard is going to be a lot more money than the other side of the boulevard. And all these little micro markets, that's where you need that understanding, because if somebody just says, oh, I got this thing and it says for the zip code, whatever that zip code is, this is the median price, that's gonna that's very misleading because I mean, I know of zip codes that literally one side of the street is worth a lot more than the other side of the street.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I love the counsel here because what you're describing is saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, have the donor get an appraisal. They got to do that. But then have the verification through a realtor who goes in and actually performs a comps and gets a better sense of walking the property and getting to see the
Mhm.
property and engaging in the property and identifying issues along with the property and being able to catch things that perhaps maybe the appraiser may not necessarily even look at, to be able to make sure that there's some verification. So it's kind of that due diligence of double duty, I guess, that's taking
Mhm.
place at the outset before the charity takes the property. I like that a lot. That's really good counsel. Okay, so believe it or not, we're wrapping up our hour.
That was fast.
I know it was. But I want you to do me this favor and tell me a little bit about, I think one of the things that people are most concerned about is just the real estate market in general. We know that rates are still pretty high. We also know that property sales are down in a lot of parts of the country, and I don't know what you're seeing here in California. It's maybe different or not. Um, and also with the issue of spiked costs of insurance and some of these other, inflation sort of bearing costs that is all kind of coming together to make houses a little bit less affordable. Can you share with us if this is there anything that's wrong with this picture? Is it going in a direction that's not good? Or share with us in terms of what you're seeing potentially on the horizon for real estate.
There's still a lot of pent-up demand for homes, and there's been pent-up demand for a number of years. I mean, this is nothing new. There's been pent-up demand for, they argued, the last 7 or 8 years because there's always been a lack of inventory. COVID was an exception where that this was craziness, an anomaly in the marketplace. So you factor that aside, but you're going to see some sorting out of, in some markets, all the vacation rentals and short-term rentals that people bought. You're going to see those come to market because that business model isn't as profitable as it once was. So that's going to create some inventory. But a lot of it's perception. Right now, buyers feel empowered. The only thing that's changed in the last year or so is the insurance costs. The mortgage rates have been bouncing around the same level. So it's not that. Prices are actually going, depending on the market, depending on the price point, some prices have gone up. You can't really say the market is doing this or going up or down. It really depends on which micro market and what price segment you're at. So, for instance, in certain markets in Southern California, if there's a single family home under $1 million, it's going to sell like fast, really fast. Why? Because there are not very many of those out there. I mean,
Yeah, that's for
they're
sure.
hard to find. Now, you go to a market like Phoenix, it's more challenging for the 600, 700 and under. That price point is a little bit more challenging than say their million plus. Their million plus is doing really well right now. So then go back to California, 3 million and above, 5 million and above, those houses are selling. Not as fast as they were, but they're still selling because those people aren't as affected by cost of things. The expense factor is one guy told us the other day. They for some reason they're not thinking about it. So it's really hard to say in a general sense, oh, it's all things are rosy, and it really depends on the area and it depends on the price point and once again the condition. Like I said, if you were to take a banged up property and it's in a desirable area and you price it well, it's going to sell. I don't care where it is. It's gone. If you take something that's 15 years old, and it's remodeling and it's not what it's called, it's not something that they see on Instagram and you overprice it, it's not going anywhere. It's going to sit and it's going to just sit on the market. So it really just depends on the price point in the area. I mean, right now, the desert, the Coachella Valley is on, I mean, that's doing really, really well in all their price points. Now they have a lot of inventory, but they're selling a lot of inventory. So it's a very, there's a lot of velocity in that marketplace right now. And who would have thought, in the summertime, some of those markets are selling 100 houses a month, some of the little submarkets.
Okay. Cassie, do you want to add anything to that?
Just really quickly, like Javier said, a lot of buyers are feeling empowered because the news in the last month or two has started saying it's a buyer's market. And it hasn't been a buyer's market in Southern California since the REO days 15 years ago. It's essentially been a seller's market for as long as most people can remember. And of course, we went through COVID and there were 30 offers on every house, and there were hardly any properties for sale. And
Mhm.
now that we're entering what we would call a more balanced market and just a normal market where it's more fair for everyone, people feel that change as very drastic because of what we just came out of with COVID.
Right.
And they think, oh my gosh, I can offer 100,000 less on any property and I can get all my repairs done and they're
Right.
going to give me closing cost credit and then I can take extra time and close late and the seller isn't going to do anything to me.
So
And
that's
that's
not
not the
happening.
case. That's not really the case. Although if buyers in this market are very lucky because they're getting the same interest rate as their friend who bought 2 years ago. Um, but they're not having 10 offers on a property.
Right.
And they are able to ask the seller to fix the roof or do this, and the sellers are being more reasonable. And we're seeing more fair outcomes where both the buyer and the seller are very happy at the closing because no one feels like they were taken advantage of. So, and the same goes for someone selling a donated property, they would kind of experience the same thing where, yeah, they might not have 20 offers on it and it's not going to sell for 100,000 over, but they're going to get a fair value. And everyone's going to feel good about it. So for now, we're kind of seeing things just like humming along, not going crazy up, not dropping. There's not going to be some foreclosure wave coming because everyone has so much equity. But yeah, it's just a balanced market. We're just the initial feeling right now is, oh my gosh, it's so different. But a year from now, we're gonna look back and realize where we were. And we don't really see anything changing anytime soon.
Markets have a funny way of working themselves out over time.
Yeah.
They just kind of like, we're just watching and seeing.
Yeah.
Well, Javier, Cassie, this has been fantastic. I know that there's probably a lot more that we can talk about, but today was absolute gold. So I'm grateful. Thank you for spending an hour with me, or an hour and some change with me. I'm so grateful for that, and grateful for just just routinely just watching you guys do amazing work within the real estate area. I've known a lot of realtors out there, and I've got to just tell you, you guys truly are the professionals, the quintessential professionals out there in the biz. And so I'm grateful, and looking forward to employing you again in the future at some date. I don't know how. I don't have any promises there, but hopefully that'll happen. So, anyways,
Well,
thank you guys.
thank you, Andy. And maybe someday we'll do part three.
There you go. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just stop recording. Hang tight. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next
Bye.
time.